that I could ever vote for a guy like Roy Moore, and that was before all of the allegations. That was you know, people in the state of Alabama knew Roy Moore. They knew this guy had been kicked off of the state Supreme Court, knew he'd been kicked off of the court twice as a judge. The last time he ran for governor, he came in 4th in the Republican primary. So that's a good question to ask. It's a question whose answer we will never know. But Willie, so much of what we saw in Alabama, so much of what we saw in Virginia, so much of what we heard when we were in Mountain Brook, Alabama, were Republicans coming up to us saying, "I am no part of this. Yep. This is not my president. This is not the party I grew up with. I'm going out today and I'm voting for a Democrat for the first time in my life." It reminded me of what we all heard when we were at Java Joe's in 2008, in January of 2008, when everybody came up to us and said, "We're Republicans, but we're voting for this Obama guy."
Yeah, and to Kimberly's point, those were a lot of white women in Mountain Brook, Alabama, that were coming up to us and saying that very thing. I can't stand for Roy Moore. I want to turn to another story that would have been a screaming headline on any other day. President Trump's working visit to London next month to inaugurate the new U.S. Embassy is now off. President Trump announced the news himself on Twitter, and although it's become common during his presidency, he curiously blames President Obama. Trump wrote, quote, "Reason I canceled my trip to London is that I am not a big fan of the Obama administration having sold perhaps the best located and finest embassy in London for peanuts, only to build a new one in an off location for $1.2 billion. Bad deal. Wanted me to cut ribbon. No." End quote. Well, the decision and first steps to relocate the embassy actually came in October 2008 when George W. Bush was president, and that came primarily because of security concerns. The UK's Daily Mail reports President Trump was disappointed in the lack of pomp planned and the lack of royal involvement. Massive protests were expected to greet Trump, who is deeply unpopular in the UK, especially in London. You may recall this Daily Mirror cover the day after Trump retweeted several anti-Muslim and anti-immigrant videos originally posted by an extreme right British group. And this morning, London's Mayor Sadiq Khan, whom Trump attacked immediately after last year's London Bridge terror attack, writes on Twitter this, quote, "Many Londoners have made it clear that Donald Trump is not welcome here while he is pursuing such a divisive agenda. It seems he finally got that message." That is from the mayor of London. Andrew Mitchell, there's a lot to sift through there, but the bottom line is President Trump got all of his facts wrong in that tweet.
Oh, absolutely, and not by accident. Look, to blame President Obama for a decision that was made by President Bush and the Bush administration as a result of the Inman report, if you recall, the commission that was convened basically to say you had to set all embassies back from the street, you had to protect them. The neighbors on Grosvenor Square were not happy with all of the concrete barriers that had been placed around the embassy. It was right there in the square. So there was a lot of anger about that. This is an embassy that goes back to John Adams. This is a location that was, you know, Dwight Eisenhower's wartime headquarters in London. And so it's centrally located. It's very, very beautiful. But the fact is that it had to be moved. And this is a process that takes place in the State Department where there are endless studies. It is the most incredibly bureaucratic process to decide where a new embassy will be and who will be the architect and how it will be designed. So all of that preceded President Obama's administration. The fact is he was not welcome. And he was not getting a royal welcome. It was not going to be a state visit. The palace had no interest in this. The government had no interest in this. The mayor of London made it very clear. And all because of the racism that he has projected, which is not welcome in Europe. And it goes to Europe's alliance yesterday in Brussels against the U.S. and against the Trump administration on the Iran deal, and how angry he was at the Macron call from France yesterday, which many of the foreign policy advisors feared was going to actually get him to reverse his anticipated decision today to again kick that ball down. forward and not reimpose sanctions, central bank and oil sanctions on Iran later today. They're going to announce that. So there's so much antipathy in Europe. So he's not just angering an entire continent of Africa and Latin and South America, and of course Haiti. And all of the people in Haiti who have suffered over the years here today on the anniversary of that incredible earthquake, and we were all down there then. But the fact is, he is angering the world and isolating the United States, and it is the racism he's projecting.
Yeah, this is the 8-year anniversary, we should point out, if you're just waking up. 8-year anniversary of that earthquake in Haiti. That's an extraordinary story out of London. Andrea, thank you so much. Walter, we sometimes have to pause and just sort of talk through these moments because there's so many of them. They tend to fly by so fast. But we're talking about Great Britain. We're talking about the special relationship, our closest ally, that our president, the President of the United States, can't go there without massive protests in the streets, without the royal family turning their backs to him. And so his reaction to not getting the royal reception he thinks he deserves is to create a narrative that's completely ungrounded in fact, with what he wrote on Twitter about President Obama.
You're right about the flood of these things, day after day. I mean, I don't know how you do it every morning on this show, because it's like drinking from a fire hose. It keeps coming at you, which means people aren't stepping back and seeing the big picture. When you were talking about in Alabama, people coming up to you and saying, I'm not part of this, where's Paul Ryan? Where's Lindsey Graham? Where's Mitch McConnell saying on this show, I'm not part of this. This has just gone too far. Somehow it's become so normalized that he's doing all these things, saying all these things that are untrue or racist or lies, and yet people say, okay, let's see what tomorrow's tweets will bring.
So, Kimberly, I mean, let's sit in it for a minute. I mean, this is, again, our closest ally. This is the special relationship. And the President of the United States feels he cannot visit because of the protests that will greet him there. And it's not just that he canceled the visit, but now he's telling this story about President Obama as an excuse to get himself out of it.
Right, and he does have a penchant for blaming President Obama for things that often President Obama had nothing to do with. Off the top, I will make the point that blaming Obama is not helping him making the statement that he made about African and Asian countries look any less racist by blaming Obama for something that he didn't do. But I think it shows that the president, this President Trump, who so much wants to be praised and celebrated, is not going to be praised or celebrated if